Mom, look at that. Dad told me a secret. My daughter said, pulling at my sleeve. Looking in the direction she pointed, I saw my husband's smartphone, its case and screen shattered from the accident. Then she pointed at the messenger icon, saying, "This." Wondering what was going on, I cautiously opened it, asking, "What's this?" I immediately stripped off all the patient pants my husband was wearing, checking every nook and cranny, and there it was. I couldn't help but cover my mouth with my hand. My name is Heather. It's been a few years since I got married, and now we have one child. My daughter's name is Amy. She goes to the nearby kindergarten and loves her friends, being a favorite among the kindergartners. After graduating from a pastry school, I started working at a restaurant and met my husband, Richard, there. He was 4 years older than me, a mid-level chef who was bright, handsome, and popular among the part-time girls who often asked him out for meals. So when Richard and I, who were plain and unremarkable, announced our marriage at work, our colleagues and customers were quite surprised, and some of the girls even harassed us. Upon finding out about the pregnancy right after the marriage, I quit my job and dedicated myself to childcare for a while. Then, when Richard turned 30, we opened a cafe on the ground floor of our house. Richard, who had always dreamed of having his own shop since childhood, I remember seeing his face sparkle like a boy when he saw the finished interior. To support him, I helped out at the cafe alongside childcare, focusing on new menus and attracting customers. Our cafe was located in the middle of a residential area, so during lunchtime, it was mostly occupied by housewives. Taking note of this, we started hosting a simple cooking school at the cafe on our day off once a week. Rumors spread about being taught by a good-looking former restaurant chef, and to my delight, the cooking school now has a long waiting list of students. The cake recipe you taught us last week was a big hit with my son and husband. That's great. Feel free to come for lunch with your family next time. Our chef will surely be delighted. Of course. Customer feedback like this is what motivates us more than anything, my husband said cheerfully while finishing up the cooking, humming a tune. Every time I witness such moments, I feel truly grateful from the bottom of my heart that we were able to open this cafe. The management of the restaurant was on track, and with Amy starting kindergarten this spring, I was looking forward to working harder. But just then, unfortunate news reached our family. Every time I witness such moments, I feel truly grateful from the bottom of my heart that we were able to open this cafe. The management of the restaurant was on track, and with Amy starting kindergarten this spring, I was looking forward to working harder. But just then, unfortunate news reached our family. A call came to the shop informing us that Richard's father had suddenly passed away from an illness. His father, who was still active as a business owner and in good health, had never seemed sick to us, so his death was unbelievable to our family. I urged my husband to quickly inform the rest of the family, but I could see a slightly bitter expression on his face. I immediately knew who he was contacting by that expression. It was Richard's brother, John. Although Richard and I are 4 years apart, I've heard from my husband in the past that he had a troubled past, causing trouble at school and work many times, not to mention the numerous times he had run-ins with the police. Since then, neither my husband nor I had any contact with him, and my husband had been avoiding us meeting John. However, it seemed like that wouldn't be the case this time. After a brief conversation over the phone, my husband's somber expression conveyed a warning: the funeral is coming, but his face also warned, be careful of him. My husband's strong reaction made me curious about what kind of person he really was, but just mentioning John's name from my mouth was enough to sour his mood, I'm sure. We started preparing for the funeral in earnest the next day, but there was much more to do than I had anticipated. Time flew by, and before I knew it, the funeral was over, and Richard's father's ashes returned to my husband's family home. The atmosphere remained somber even after we returned home, so my husband and I tried to distract ourselves from the sadness by reopening the cafe the next day. Our customers seemed to have been waiting for the reopening, as the day went by in a blur of busyness, and I felt like I couldn't remember much about my father-in-law. As I was about to let myself succumb to exhaustion and sleep without thinking about the sadness, I couldn't. Because as closing time approached, the last person my husband would want to see arrived at the shop. "Long time no see, Richard." "Well, I did see you yesterday, but you came all the way to the shop. How about serving us dinner for two?" "Hey, Rachel, it's fine to have dinner here tonight, right?" "Huh? In this shabby place?" "Well, whatever. By the way, this place is so small." It was Richard's brother, John, and his wife, Rachel. They sat down at a table without permission and started looking at the menu. While muttering, "Troublesome guy came," Richard came out of the kitchen. "What are you here for?" "I'm pretty sure I told relatives not to give you the address of our shop. Besides, we're already closed today, so please leave." "Well, it's not that simple. I have something important to discuss. I came all the way here. You seem to be running your own shop and making quite a bit of money without any stress, right? While we work desperately every day and only get peanuts for pay. So, it wouldn't be a problem for you to just hand over all of Dad's inheritance to me, right? It's enough that you say you'll give up all of the inheritance." While saying this, Richard continued to look at the menu without looking up. It seems John came to persuade us because he wanted to monopolize the inheritance. I wouldn't just say okay to that kind of talk. The inheritance will be distributed as planned among the siblings. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter, and this isn't a place for you to be. Please leave." As Richard replied, John looked up from the menu and glared silently at Richard, then kicked the table hard with his foot. I was surprised by the sudden action, as the wooden table crashed loudly onto the floor, menus and decorations scattering around. "Richard, can't you just listen to what I, your brother, have to say? You've been disowned by Dad once. You're no longer my brother. You're a stranger." Despite John appearing to be at the peak of anger, Richard remained calm, not changing his expression. I see. I understand your position well. However, you'll regret defying me." Turning red with anger, John grabbed Richard's collar. After saying this, he and Rachel left the shop. The floor looked scattered as if a storm had passed, and the shop fell into silence. The only relief was that Amy was already asleep in her room and wasn't involved in the commotion. But the real storm began the next day. The next morning, when I went out to open the shop, I found large graffiti sprayed on the shutters. What's this? It's terrible. Insults like "terrible food" or "never coming again" were written in red letters, standing out. I immediately reported it to my husband and tried to clean the graffiti, but soap and water alone couldn't remove it. Reluctantly, we contacted a professional cleaner to have it cleaned. Furthermore, during the day, we were asked by customers, with quite anxious faces, "Hey, I want to confirm something. Is it true that you use expired ingredients in this shop?" This happened several times. When I asked them for more details, it seemed that someone had posted on the internet that they had stomach pains after eating our food, or that the food smelled rotten when they ate it. I heard that there had been an increase in the number of word-of-mouth reviews on the internet, which stated things like, "I had stomach pains after eating our food." I was concerned because there had been a large increase in the number of word-of-mouth reviews on the internet. Panicked, I explained that we never serve dishes that endanger customers' safety and that there had been an increase in prank reviews on the internet lately. However, all the customers seemed to remain suspicious. If there really were cases of food poisoning, it would be a big problem, but so far, there had been no reports of such patients from the health department. I was convinced that it was the work of those two. The harassment continued to escalate, with silent calls, negative posts on social media, and even spreading rumors deliberately tarnishing our reputation in front of the shop. Although the number of customers gradually decreased, regulars and acquaintances who knew us well increased their visits to the shop, bringing along friends, showing their support. For my husband and me, it was deeply appreciated and heartwarming. However, no matter how much they supported us, the harassment didn't stop. If the harassment was directed only at me and Richard, we could endure it. But if it turned against Amy, it would be irreversible. Once I started thinking that way, I couldn't sleep at night out of fear, and I couldn't focus even when Amy was at kindergarten, and my husband seemed to be in the same state. After discussing with Richard, we decided to give a portion of the property to John and Rachel before the harassment got worse and Amy was put in danger. One day, I went to the usual market in the morning for shopping. I thought there would be few customers on a weekday, but I felt a strange unease as I hurried back to the shop to make it in time for opening hours. Despite the opening time being near, the shutters remained closed. Feeling odd, I went around to the back door and entered the shop, but the room was eerily quiet, and Richard was nowhere to be seen.
"Mommy!"
I heard Amy's voice from the back of the shop, so I quickly put down my things and headed towards the direction of the voice.
"Amy! What are you doing in such a dark place? Weren't you supposed to go to kindergarten with Daddy?"
Amy shook her head anxiously. "No, you see, Mommy, I dressed myself, but Daddy went outside. So, I waited here." Feeling sorry for how long she must have been alone in the shop, I instinctively hugged her tightly. "I see. You did a great job waiting alone. By the way, why did Daddy go outside?" Daddy and Uncle John and Aunt Rachel were here, and they all went out to play, leaving me behind." The names that came out of Amy's mouth made my eyes widen. My heartbeat accelerated, and a vague sense of unease swelled within me. "I'm sorry, honey." I sat Amy down on a chair and hurriedly took out my phone to call Richard. But he didn't answer the phone at all. I tried calling again after hanging up once, but it was still no good. They were taken away by those people over the inheritance issue. Then how should I go about finding them? With John's violent and volatile nature, involving the rough and tough police would be risky. What if he does something to my husband? Should I contact the police just in case? As panic gripped me and my mind raced, it was Amy's voice saying, "Mommy, I'm hungry," that brought me back to reality. I had left breakfast to Richard, thinking I'd be back from shopping in time, but it seems he left before feeding Amy. There's no way we can open the shop today. After temporarily closing the shop with a sign outside, I returned home to prepare breakfast for Amy. As I sat at the table to eat with her, I glanced at the clock and saw that it was nearly noon. Just as I was about to check my phone for any missed calls from Richard, an unknown number called. "Hello. Who is this?" "Hello. I'm with the paramedics. Are you Richard's wife by any chance?" The word paramedic sent a chill down my spine, and the unpleasant thought I had just imagined resurfaced in my mind. While clutching my smartphone tightly, I quietly listened to the person speaking. After the conversation ended, I quickly took Amy and left the house. My hand holding Amy's was visibly shaking. According to the paramedic, Richard had darted into the street and collided with a truck. He had suffered severe injuries and was currently being transported to the hospital by ambulance. With my head in a panic, I drove to the hospital, desperately trying to calm myself with the thought that Amy was in the car. Upon arriving at the hospital, I rushed to find Richard, but a nurse informed me he's in critical condition and undergoing emergency surgery. No time for details. Amy and I were left waiting, and I stared intently at the operating room light. I'm not sure how much time passed, but I noticed Amy had fallen asleep using my lap as a pillow. From the window at the end of the hallway, I could see the evening sky tinged with red. My hands, still shaking since noon, gently stroked Amy's head, making a soothing sound. Then the light went out, and the doctors and nurses emerged. "Are you his wife?" "Yes, that's me." "How is Richard, my husband?" "Please be assured, your husband has pulled through. However, he has not regained consciousness yet. It all depends on his physical strength and vitality now."
"Oh no!"
Richard was moved to the ICU, and I sat beside him, staring at his face, showing no signs of awakening. Feeling drained and overwhelmed by anxiety about the future. I wondered what would happen if Richard never regained consciousness. No, I couldn't afford to think like that. I gripped my husband's hand, trying to dispel the anxiety and praying for his safety. Then I noticed Amy tugging at the sleeve of my shirt.
What's wrong, Amy? Are you tired?
Shaking her head, she pointed at Richard's smartphone with a cracked screen and case. Look at this. Dad said it's a secret from Uncle John and the others. Then she pointed to the Line app icon, saying, this one. Suspicious, I hesitantly opened it. I saw a barrage of messages that seemed like threats sent from John, now called John, to Richard. Scrolling through, the messages appeared to have been sent over several days. But among them, I discovered a terrifying image and involuntarily stopped scrolling. What is this? Amy and a utility knife? The image showed a man's hand holding a utility knife and another of Amy playing in the kindergarten playground, taken from a distance with a zoom lens. Beneath the images was the message, your thigh won't be enough. Hand over all the inheritance. I quickly removed Richard's hospital pants and found a cut among the injuries, likely from a knife. Feeling a deep sense of horror about what John had done, I involuntarily covered my mouth with my hand. I knew he was a violent man, but I never imagined he would actually take action. Thinking there might be more threatening evidence, I checked Richard's smartphone again. As I suspected, there were messages left in other apps, including a recording of this morning's conversation between Richard and John. I needed to confirm what happened at the store. With trembling fingers, I pressed the play button. The content was indeed from this morning, but it was so horrifying that my face turned pale, and I accidentally dropped Richard's smartphone due to my trembling fingers. As I sat in the chair, dumbfounded, John and his wife entered the hospital room. Instead of showing concern for Richard's condition, John blurted out, given his condition, he's got a few days left at most. Have you contacted the funeral home yet? When is it going to be? We're busy, so you better hurry up and decide. Wow, he's a goner for sure. My condolences. While they casually asked me, I was seething with anger at John and his wife. Clenching my fist, I glared at John. What's with that look? What do you think we did, huh?
What did you do, you ask? Just stop showing your rotten nature. John, he left all the evidence to tell me what you two did.
I blurted this out and played the earlier conversation from Richard's smartphone again. The recording started with John and his wife coming to the store while I was out shopping. You two again. What do you want this time? We came to negotiate directly since you won't hand over the inheritance, no matter how long we wait. You saw the photos we sent, right? After a pause, there was a commotion as Richard hurriedly left the store. The sounds of Richard's heavy breathing and footsteps on the ground suggested he was running. Probably to get away from the store to avoid harm to Amy. However, John's voice could be heard shouting, "Wait, you bastard," followed by, "Do you care what happens to your daughter? You know she's still inside the house, right? We won't guarantee her safety unless you hand over all the inheritance." Fine. I'll give you all the inheritance. Just promise me and get out of my family's life. Right after Richard screamed that, the sound of a truck's brakes and the screams of passers-by filled the air. Then the recording stopped. It's because you two came to the store that Richard. Before I knew it, I was crying and shouted at John and his wife through tears.
What are you talking about? There's no evidence we pushed him.
How strange. She never said anything about being pushed, did she? Suddenly, John turned around at the sound of an unfamiliar voice from behind. I'm from the East Police Station. We received a report of an attempted murder, so I came immediately. The detective introduced himself while showing his badge. Unprepared for the police's arrival, John and his wife froze, their expressions turning pale. Indeed, after listening to the recording, I had immediately contacted the police. Are you the one who called, Heather? Yes, that's me. Thank you for coming all the way to the hospital. Hearing this, John and his wife muttered "you jerk" under their breath and glared at me with bloodshot eyes. They wanted to hear more details, so I explained everything meticulously, showing the evidence I had collected from the past harassment to today's incident. While I was explaining, another detective arrived and handed over a laptop, saying, "Here's the surveillance footage. Please check it." The detective who was listening to me checked the footage, which was indeed from the scene of today's incident. Fast forwarding to the time of the incident, Richard, followed by John and his wife, appeared. It seemed like there was a commotion, and it looked like John's wife pushed Richard. "By the looks of it, you two are wearing the same clothes in this footage, so it's definitely you two, isn't it?" Though it was clear they were the ones in the footage, John and his wife remained silent, unwilling to admit it. Then, Rachel, who had turned pale since the police arrived, spoke up.
"No, that's wrong. I didn't push him, I just reached out because he was staggering."
She hysterically raised her voice, trying to make excuses, but the police presented more evidence. The detective switched to a different footage, this time showing a truck's dashcam. In the video, Richard appeared on the left side of the screen, and she was seen forcefully pushing Richard's back, causing him to tumble in front of the truck. After seeing this footage, do you still claim you just reached out to him? What do you say? Unable to make any more excuses, Rachel collapsed to the floor. At that moment, miraculously, Richard woke up.
"Richard, are you okay? I'll call the nurse right away."
Awakening, Richard started to move his mouth as if trying to say something. "Let me explain." "Richard, you can talk? Take your time, it's okay." Hearing my words, Richard slowly nodded and began to reveal the truth about this morning's events. After rushing out of the store, he was quickly caught up by John and Rachel. He disclosed how they had threatened him. He also revealed that John grabbed Richard, who was not responding to his demands, and that during the struggle, Rachel pushed him as hard as she could.
"Don't bullshit us. We don't know anything."
John, denying the truth that Richard had told, began to act out and tried to resist when a detective attempted to restrain him, eventually hitting the detective in the face. His assault led to an arrest for obstructing law enforcement, as John was subdued and arrested by several detectives. Rachel, too, kept screaming, "It wasn't me. I just reached out to help," but was eventually handcuffed and taken away. Having witnessed everything, I suddenly felt all strength leave my body and slumped into the chair. "Richard, why did you keep quiet about being slashed?" "I didn't want to worry you, Heather, since the harassment continued and you were always there for the cafe and me." "I'm sorry," Richard said, looking remorseful, and I was left speechless. Later, the police revealed that the motive behind John and Rachel's actions was indeed to target our family's wealth, resulting in their disinheritance. John, even after being disowned, had not held a steady job and had been lavishing money on a hostess at a familiar club, accumulating debt, while Rachel indulged in luxury goods with the borrowed money. Eventually, they resorted to loan sharks and were chased by debt collectors, growing tired of such a life when they heard of the father's death. Their share of the inheritance would only cover their debts, leading them back into a cycle of borrowing. That's when they targeted our wealth, thinking they could use Amy as leverage to make us comply with their demands. They forced Richard to promise the inheritance, but believed that if Richard himself were gone, they could get all of the wealth unconditionally. Due to the egregiousness of their harassment and motive, John and Rachel received a prison sentence and would be incarcerated for several years. Weeks after the incident, my husband's injuries finally healed, and we were able to reopen the cafe. Amy could safely attend kindergarten again, and I believed our family could continue to live peacefully. Yet I carried an unsettling feeling since the day Richard was brought to the hospital and I had to remove his pants to check his thigh wound. However, I couldn't pinpoint the source of this unease and felt troubled. One night, Richard went out to celebrate his recovery with friends and came home drunk late at night. He fell asleep on the sofa, and as I thought it must have been fun after a long time and started to change him into his pajamas, I realized what had been bothering me. My husband's leg hair, which had always been there, was completely gone, leaving his legs as smooth as a woman's. While it's true that the trend of beauty-conscious men has grown, Richard was never the type to engage in such grooming. He kept himself clean because he worked in the kitchen, so why would he suddenly go for hair removal? Suspicious, I consulted with a friend knowledgeable about such trends on the same day. She told me that nowadays, women prefer androgynous men who are careful about their appearance over the traditionally masculine ones with leg and chest hair. So, many men nowadays opt for hair removal to be more attractive. For attractiveness, huh? I see. Thinking this was my chance while he was drunk, I decided to check his line messages. I easily unlocked his smartphone with his birth date. Opening Messenger, I found a chat with someone named Karen at the top, saying, "I had a great time today. Will I see you next at the cooking school? Can't wait." It was clear they had been interacting until just before. This Karen, a student who has been attending every week despite the cooking school being notoriously hard to book, was someone I remembered well. She was noticeably younger and cuter compared to the other mostly older students, standing out significantly. It seemed the supposed celebration with friends was a lie, and he had been enjoying his time with Karen from the evening until now. Unbelievable. All the memories of nursing him every day in the hospital, and helping with the cafe, flashed back in my mind, fueling a resolve that he would never be forgiven. I meticulously saved the remaining chat history with Karen and their couple photos, well organized in an album, onto my smartphone. The cafe that we used to run together as a loving couple now seemed irrelevant. Strangely, all the emotions of supporting each other through life with my husband were turning into nothingness. Preparing for my revenge against my husband's betrayal, I meticulously planned for days without missing a detail. Then, on the day of the cooking school, where I had gathered ample material for retaliation, an unsuspecting Karen arrived smiling and greeting the other students. "Hello," she greeted me cheerfully, her face seemingly smug with triumph. When the time came and everyone, including my husband, was assembled, my revenge commenced. As usual, I handed out papers to the students, supposedly with today's recipe. "Today's recipe uses familiar ingredients," I said while replacing the handouts with the exchanges and photos of my husband and Karen, and distributed them to everyone, including them. They quickly realized what it was and started shaking. "What is this doing here?
What is this? Don't look, everyone!"
The other students, recognizing my husband and Karen, began murmuring, asking questions like, "Isn't this the chef and that student? What's going on?" Given his image as a handsome, former restaurant chef who seemingly ran a cafe harmoniously with his wife, the housewife students started a backlash. "I never thought he was like this. I will never visit the cafe again. This is sickening," they said one after another, and everyone but Karen left the place. "Well, everyone's gone now. The rumors about you two will spread quickly, and this cafe is finished. Can you leave now? I don't want to see your face anymore. After all the care I gave, what a way to repay me," I said coldly, avoiding eye contact with Richard as I put away the kitchen tools the students were supposed to use.
What have you done? How could you do something that drives away the customers we've painstakingly gathered?"
Richard yelled, perhaps out of embarrassment or anger, or maybe both, as if he was about to hit me. "I'm not joking. I have no intention of continuing with this cafe, and I plan to shut it down immediately. Besides, you're worried about the cafe after cheating on me? I've completely lost respect for you."
"What does that matter now? We were finally getting the business on track. You can't just shut it down. Who do you think built this place?"
Who built it, indeed. It's true you wanted to own a cafe, but I was the one who actually paid for the construction of our home and cafe. Yes, I was the investor in the cafe. It turned out after we got married that Richard, who had worked in restaurants, was bad with money and had hardly saved anything. I had saved money from my days working at a restaurant, so when Richard wanted to open a cafe and asked me to sponsor it, I agreed. I hate to say it now, but I've already put the building up for sale. Tomorrow, the agents will come to clear everything, so please pack your things and leave today."
"What? I haven't heard anything about this. And packing up today, how can you spring this on me all of a sudden?"
Then forget the stuff, just get out now. Can't you understand I can't stand to breathe the same air as you for one more second? Why don't you stay with Karen? With a look of realization, Richard turned to Karen. Karen, please help me. I have nowhere to go if I'm thrown out of here. You said the other day you wanted to break up with him and live with me, right? Desperately, my husband grabbed Karen's arm, pleading.
What? No way. I'm annoyed being bossed around by that woman. Besides, I live with my boyfriend. You were just a convenient fling because you're somewhat handsome, old man.
My husband, whose recent exchanges with Karen on Messenger seemed like a lie, was left gaping in disbelief at her attitude.
Wait, Karen!
Ignoring Richard's call, Karen left the cafe without looking back at him. Then he turned to me.
Heather, I was wrong. I apologize for everything. Please let's start over, I beg you.
I financed your dream, cared for you, and this is how you repay me by cheating? I can't imagine living with you again. Besides, I've already found a new place for Amy and me to live. We're moving out tomorrow after finalizing everything. I've prepared the divorce papers, just come to pick them up tomorrow. Goodbye. With that, I left Richard alone in the cafe and went upstairs to our home, locking the door behind me. I didn't want Richard to enter ever again. After a while, I saw Richard leave the upstairs home, allowing me to sleep peacefully that night. The next day was busy with movers and waste disposal services clearing out our home and the cafe, leaving it empty. When Richard contacted me to pick up the divorce papers, I hurried downstairs with Amy. We had already packed, ready to move to our new home. I seemed even more resolved than the day before, but I no longer needed to worry. Here, it's filled out, just file it, I said, handing him the divorce papers and leaving with Amy. I filed for alimony against Richard and Karen. Despite Richard's inheritance, he had debts in his name, not related to the cafe, and his daily life became a struggle with repayments, alimony, and child support, leading to a poor lifestyle and despair. Of course, he does not have the financial strength to open a new restaurant, so he is now doing field work in a rural area. He didn't return to restaurant work, seemingly too proud to start from scratch. I thought little of him, but as long as he paid the alimony and child support, it didn't matter to me. When I was getting used to my new life, I opened a cafe in a quiet town. It was small compared to my previous cafe, but I consulted with an architect and built it with great care so that I, now a single mother, could operate it by myself. Perhaps because of its mom and pop concept, which makes it easy for customers with children to visit the restaurant, it is becoming so popular that it has even been featured in the local newspaper. Amy was thriving in our new, nature-filled town, and watching her grow was my joy.
Today's dinner is your favorite hamburger, Amy. How about that? Yay! Mammy's hamburgers are the best in the world. I want ice cream for dessert.
Our happy and cheerful conversations made each day special, with her innocent laughter warming my heart. Wanting to protect her smile forever, I held this strong desire close as we walked hand in hand to the park.